Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Today the Prime Minister inaugurated the Sudarshan Setu. This bridge connects Beat Dwarka Island in the Gulf of Kutch and Okha in Devabhoomi Dwarka in Gujarat. Okha has a seaport. The bridge will boost religious tourism primarily. Now, under Prime Minister Gati Shakti program, there have been a number of bridges that have been built and are under construction in various phases across the country. Not only do these bridges shorten the distances and connect different parts of the country to each other, they create employment opportunities, they reduce time to commute, thereby reducing the cost of transportation and logistics. Robust, strong infrastructure, in fact, is the foundation for a developed economy. Companies, domestic and foreign, get an impetus to expand their horizons. There's yet another very crucial aspect of building infrastructure and particularly the bridges. This is to facilitate the troop movement and strengthen border security. This $1 trillion initiative towards infrastructure development keeps up with China and other modernizing economies. The development today helps me carry forward this conversation within the infrastructure domain of the $5 trillion that have been allocated for the 5-year Gati Shakti plan, but particularly the bridges that have been inaugurated to shorten the distances, to bridge the divides geographical, cultural and military. Let's start my conversation. On the telecast with me is Professor S.K. Singh. He's the Vice Chancellor of the Rajasthan Technical University in Kota. He's also the former Professor of Civil Engineering. Now, Professor S.K. Singh, as I mentioned about how there is in fact an immense need for infrastructure to be as a foundation stone for businesses, job creation, ease of living, ease of traveling, logistic and transportation cost reduction, and the advantages of a proper infrastructure within the country, from the smallest of the towns and villages to the metropolitans of the country. How important does it become in the larger scheme of things?
So first of all, good evening to all of you. Just today, our Prime Minister has inaugurated this Sudarshan Setu in Kutch, as just you told, and since these are the very important part of the infrastructure, and now these bridges, Atal Bridge and this Sudarshan Bridge, they both are inaugurated in this year only, and which is reducing a distance. Earlier, for the same place, we had to travel long distance, and by constructing this, the distance has been reduced. When this distance has been reduced, the time is being reduced, and also the infrastructure or resources which were being consumed, that is also being. First, I will speak that. First of all, some employment is getting because infrastructure development, because of the development of these infrastructure, and also since construction of these big bridges, and this Sudarshan Setu is the longest cable stayed bridges, and this is the technology cable stayed bridge technology has been used for the construction of this bridge, and by using this technology, this is the longest one. Earlier in Delhi, also this signature bridge which is constructed in Delhi in 2009-10, that is also cable stayed bridges. So this type of technology, recent technology, is being used in our country also, and this Atal Setu is also the longest bridge on the sea, and also this Sudarshan Setu. This is the longest cable stayed bridge of the country, and this will connect. By this, the time will be saved, and other resources will be saved, and also since time will be saved, distance will be saved. So another part, which I also one thing I would like to add, since distance has been reduced, so the travel time has been reduced. The vehicles will take less time to travel from
Right,
one place.
absolutely. But also, you know, the
I would
challenges, the people, the experts, the city planners, urban planners have to face in building these mega structures, whether it is about the Atal Setu, or we talk about the bridge that has today been inaugurated by the Prime Minister, or we talk about the Chenab Valley Bridge that had also been constructed in the past years. What is it? What are the parameters? What are the measures that have to be taken by the civil planners, by the urban planners, to ensure the sturdity of the bridges, to ensure that there is feasibility, and to ensure that the funds that are infused into building these mega structures are then replicating in terms of the revenue that is generated?
So, in fact, a lot of resources are to be used in the construction of these bridges. A lot of steel is to be used. A lot of cement is to be used, and also technology, because these bridges are constructed on the sea. So, definitely, the technology is also which is to be used, so that there should not be corrosion of the parts. And I tell you, this bridge has consumed so much steel. Steel has been used for construction of these. So
right.
when all these resources are being used, so these resources when they will be coming from our country, so for development of our country itself, these are very important
right.
for us.
Absolutely. Okay, fair enough. Vivek Menon is an urban planner also on the telecast. You know, Vivek, when we talk about closing the gaps, shortening the distances, it is not just about our metropolitan cities, but it is also about the northeastern states. There have been a number of bridges that have been installed over there. They are at various phases of construction as well. In fact, in Assam and Meghalaya, and Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, this is a border area. This is also a sensitive area in terms of the military ambush that India has faced in the past several months from the Chinese belligerence that was witnessed. So, you know, all these aspects do come into mind. And the fact that this movement has happened at a high rate, at a high speed, obviously showcases what the government of India at this point of time has in terms of willingness, in terms of the focus, which is multi-pronged, whether development of the country, whether about attracting FDI, whether about allowing businesses to further grow, whether about generating employment, whether about reducing the freight rates, reducing transportation costs, and thereby impacting positively all sectors of the economy, whether it is about agriculture, it is about processed foods, it is about steel plants and their transportation of their steel and assembly lines.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, going back to the 1950s in the United States, you know, the Eisenhower interstate system that they built, you know, was built interestingly for troop movement. And like you mentioned earlier on, this would be a lifeline for troop movement across the country. But more importantly than that, you know, I think since the 2000s, the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government, when they proposed the Golden Quadrilateral and the East-West corridors, I think, you know, a lot has changed since then. And the pace at which infrastructure is being added today is significant and monumental. And I think, you know, the current, government has to be given credit for that, from Nitin Gadkari to, of course, you know, Narendra Modi himself, for seeing this vision of great connectivity. And I think, you know, the northeast part of India has kind of been ignored for the longest of times, and ensuring that, you know, that we bridge the gap and we bridge over these big rivers that are there in this, that crisscross the length and breadth of our country, is extremely critical. You know, I think connectivity will be a game changer, especially for India in the 21st century, when, you know, manufacturing is gaining momentum. We need to be able to move goods within our hinterland, and, you know, considering the fact that we have great connectivity, seaport connectivity across the country, we have a huge coastline. And to be able to, leverage this coastline, we need to have a phenomenal network of roads and bridges that connect. And I think this kind of connectivity between these 28 states of ours, our union, is going to be critical over the next, 20 to 30 to 40 years. You did mention, obviously countries like China and the Americas are investing a lot into infrastructure, and this $5 trillion that they are investing today will be a great impetus for development across the country. And I think that's a phenomenal initiative, the kind of money that's being spent. And, getting back to the technology itself, today bridges are being built much faster, they're being built much sturdier, and they're also being built for earthquake resistance. These kind of bridges, the cable stay bridges, there are segmental construction that's being done in metro areas. And these are all, there are pre-constructed panels that are coming in, prefabricated panels that are coming in. And I think this really improves the quality of construction, and it also improves the speed at which we're able to construct this. So all in all, I think these are all phenomenal, initiatives.
When we talk about, you being a city planner and talking about how these infrastructural projects need to be taken, at what pace they need to be taken, with the kind of magnanimity, with the kind of enormous infrastructure that we saw in Mumbai, the Atal Bridge that we saw. We talk about the bridge that has been constructed, has been inaugurated today. We talk about the Assam-Arunachal Pradesh bridge, and now, very difficult, challenging circumstances in which the Chenab bridge has also been built in Jammu and Kashmir. Now, what are, again, like I asked before to the previous panelists, what are the big challenges that a planner has to think about, the civil engineer has to think about? And you spoke about how these are earthquake resistant bridges, you have these assembly lines, you have prefabricated structures that are already installed over there. So how do we ensure that they last a lifetime? And also to keep in mind the aspects, to keep in mind the parameters, to actually allow for the practicalities to be panned out in the duration of the construction that is then completed.
Right. So, usually such kind of planning happens, way before we see the end results. It starts with schematics. It starts with, traffic studies and it starts with, obviously looking at connectivity between the hinterland itself. And, once that happens, that's when, obviously that's where the urban planners are involved. They determine the kind of, carriageway width, the kind of decks that they need, and all of that. And once that's done, then it gets into detailed design. And detailed design, again, depends, moves towards the kind of construction itself. The kind of bridge that we want to build, because, there are various types of bridges that can be built. You can build bridges which are cable stays like you've seen currently. You can see bridges that are basically, deck and beam, columns and beams, and, constructing it within earthquake resistance, earthquake zones, as well as constructing it in areas where, like in the sea, they have their own challenges. You've got to put in cofferdams, to isolate the footings that you're putting in. And so I think, there's a high level of planning that goes into it. And, the construction companies that we have today, and I'll just name a few like L&T and Hindustan Construction and several of the others, they've been working abroad, working in the Far East, working in the Middle East, building such bridges. And I'm glad that they're bringing this kind of technology back to India, where, unfortunately, to tell you the truth, we are not seeing the same level of construction in urban areas, especially parastatals in urban areas. I live in Bangalore, and if you look at the Bangalore, Metropolitan Agency, the Bangalore Development Authority, they don't use such technologies, and this is kudos to the National Highway Authority of India. NHAI has really taken things to a very different level, and I think that's the kind of planning and choice of technology that can really help India grow.
Right.
I sure wish that such technologies would actually come into the urban centers where, many of our, interchanges, they're languishing, they're poorly designed. And I think that's something that really needs to happen within our urban centers, and it's happening across the country. And NHAI, I think, is really doing a phenomenal job along with the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways.
Okay. I'm going to also bring in the military aspect to it. And let's start my conversation with Commodore Anil Jai Singh in terms of how the port connectivity has hastened in the progress that is being made, whether we talk about the Andaman Nicobar Islands, we talk about Lakshadweep, and now we're talking about the Gulf of Kutch, which has also now been further connected with the other parts of Gujarat on the western front. So how Yes, there is one factor which is commercial aspect to it. How do you look at it in terms of further enhancing the prowess of the Indian Navy?
We've got a very good overview from your previous panelists on the various challenges and the various elements of such complicated bridge construction. But I think most importantly, this whole connectivity program in India, whether be it Gati Shakti, be it Sagarmala, which is a 15-year port-led development program, I think it is part of a larger plan. And when you do long-term strategic planning to make a country develop, it can't be in short bursts. It has to be long-term. I think connectivity is one of the keys to that. And connectivity means good road connectivity, good rail connectivity, good port connectivity across the board. So that you save time, you save effort, you save huge costs on fuel. It propels economic growth, it propels employment, it creates it'll create smaller urban centers between places like we were talking at one stage of a Bombay-Delhi freight corridor with 7 new cities en route. So all these factors go into developing the strategic dimension of this. And this is what, you cannot look at it just militarily. Militarily, it's important. All the bridges that have come across in the northeast and connecting Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, etc., have a dual role. The military role is very important because there used to be a time when the army had to cross the Brahmaputra, they had to do it on ferries and boats. Now, that's not how you're going to win wars in the future. You've got to have very good connectivity. So every bridge, I think, that's being built now has a dual role. It is also meant to be a strategic asset. It is meant to facilitate the troop travel, be it the bridges, be it the Atal Tunnel, which is, in Ladakh, Himachal, where now, earlier the Rohtang Pass used to be closed off for 4 months of the year. Now, if you look at what we are facing in Galwan and across the LAC, if we didn't have good road connectivity with Leh and Ladakh and that part of the world, our troops would have been greatly constrained in getting logistic support in the winter. But we've been able to circumvent that. We've been able to overcome that because of these tunnels that have come up. Similarly, the bridges. India is going to be a 5 trillion economy and subsequently a 10 trillion economy. There'll be an exponential growth in everything, in the movement of goods across the country, be it from ports into the hinterland, be it from the hinterland to the ports, between cities in the country. And therefore, these bridges are going to be an extremely strategic asset that the country has. India is not the first country, as was brought out by a previous panelist, to think of a military dimension to this. If you notice now, all the new highways that are being built, whether it's the Lucknow-Agra Expressway or even, all these expressways, they're also practicing landing fighter jets on that. These are alternate strategic alternatives that you have to have. Tomorrow, your runways could be bombed out of shape. You have a highway to land on. So the highway that's being built should be able to take the weight of a landing jet. So these are all the factors, I think, that have come in and made it very important that when we look at this kind of improvement in infrastructure for improving connectivity, we have to look at a multi-dimensional kind of overview. We cannot just focus on one thing and say...
That's a very interesting and insightful points that you make, Commodore Anil Jai Singh, and Major General Shashi Asthana is also on the telecast with me. And taking forward this point, sir, with regards to how up until very recently, we would not even have roads for our army personnel to travel long distances to allow for our borders to be secure. And now this bridge creation, the bridge construction, the roads that are being constructed, particularly when the threat to our sovereignty, threat to our country's integrity is in the difficult times of the line of actual control, combat that happened, the conflict that has gone on. These are the pressing factors that were behind a very strategic goal to allow for infrastructure to be smooth, to be available for troop mobility, and that's what has happened. But in hindsight, could these developments have been made prior to the time that we at this point of time are looking at this infrastructure build-up?
See, you can't rewind the past, but what is happening in last decade or so is phenomenal infrastructure growth, which is very good for the country, as well as in all dimensions. Let me broaden almost all the panelists have covered a large number of very valid points. Let me broaden the subject a little more. For a country like India, the national aim is peaceful, inclusive growth. This inclusive growth cannot happen unless you have a sound infrastructure which connects every corner of the country, which also includes the border areas. If you see the border areas, especially with China, which you mentioned, the question which specifically which you asked, there was an infrastructure asymmetry between China and us for various reasons. And one of the reasons was, of course, the terrain on their side is very easy as compared to terrain on our side to construct roads there. So therefore, and also the political will at some point of time was not that strong, perhaps, as has been shown in recent times. But notwithstanding that, the importance of infrastructure is that even when China violated the confidence building measures and moved ahead, we could do the mirror deployment within no time of almost 50, 60,000 troops. It
Right.
couldn't have been possible unless we had the good infrastructure. Now, let me put some statistics on ground. As of today, India has the second largest road infrastructure in the world. We are just behind America, that is, which has about 65 lakhs plus roads, and we have got about 63 lakhs plus roads. Apparently, before we become a 5 trillion economy, maybe we would cross this landmark even maybe earlier. Secondly, you can't become a 5 trillion economy unless you have a solid infrastructures for the reasons which everybody has brought out in terms of the logistics cost, in terms of transportation, in terms of fuel cost, in terms of everything, ease of doing business, foreign direct investments and things like that. Now, another aspect is today, if you see the market of India being flooded by Chinese goods, one of the reason is that they are cheaper. Now, why they are cheaper? I am given to understand there is a study to say that the cost of logistics of the finished product in India, as well as the raw product, transportation of raw product, is one of the highest in the world. And this is what is killing our industry. Despite we having cheaper labor than China, our products are becoming costly and therefore not competitive, and therefore there is a Chinese influx of the goods in India. So if you sort out this infrastructure, if you sort out the transportation cost, and if you sort out the logistics cost, you will find that your goods will be cheaper, it will be competitive, and the buyer's choice will swing in front of Indian goods. And unless that happens, irrespective of the regulations you make, Chinese good will continue to flow in India. So that's another reason.
Okay.
As far as the border infrastructure is concerned, let me tell you, in last 10 years or so, the border infrastructure has gone up almost 4 times as compared to what was the rate before that. And that, I think, is a good compliment for the planners as well as for all the staff who is involved with this particular project,
Okay.
with all these projects.
Okay.
We are
All right.
looking at various important projects like the tunnel under Brahmaputra. It is on its way. Once that comes up, maybe the troop movement to LAC would be even much faster. So these are a whole lot of projects in pipeline.
Okay.
There is a long way to go, but I'm sure it will work out well.
Vivek, I'll come back to you. And in terms of what is required by our country, by our military, by our businesses and agriculturalists, there is an immense amount of raw material that is required to build the bridges. And you spoke about how we have shortage of it. We import still a significant percentage of our steel requirements from China. The fabrication setups, the plants that have been built up, several of them being also imported from across the globe. How do we become an import-centric country when it comes to building our infrastructure to indigenously developing products for these mega structures?
Yeah, I think, that's a challenge that India has to surmount. And, I think even if you compare and contrast it with the United States, they're struggling with this problem right now because I think the over-dependence on China over the past, 2 decades, again, like the previous panelist, Mr. Shashi, just mentioned, I think, goods in China are cheap. They're able to bring them across to other countries in a much cheaper fashion. And so I think, the local industry has suffered, local manufacturing has suffered. And I think that's where India needs to step up its game. It's not the fact that we do not have enough of raw material. In fact, in Karnataka and Kudremukh, if you look at it, we have enough of iron ore, but we don't have the processing facilities for this iron ore. And I think that's where the challenge lies, is to be able to meet the demands, the growing demands of energy, of raw materials. India really needs to step up its game. And I think that's something that obviously is, for the manufacturing segment to do. I think, the government's policies towards manufacturing need to change, probably subsidies, much like the IT industry grew in the early 2000s here in Karnataka, and they were given subsidies to set up, back office systems, so much so that, I think similarly, the manufacturing industry needs to be given an impetus to be able to become self-sufficient, self-sustaining. And I think that's where India can reduce its dependence on, imported material for such large infrastructure projects.
Right, you're right. And, when we talk about as basic raw material, raw ingredient as steel, and we have some of the biggest steel plants across the globe. We talk about the Tatas, the Jindals, we talk about SAIL, we talk about SR. So, these have been established brands that have been built up, some of them even before independence. How should, like you said, the subsidies that need to be provided, the SEZ zones that need to be provided, but these have already been done by the government. So is it okay to import certain percentage of our building blocks for infrastructural needs? Is that all right? Or should India be looking inwards for all its raw material needs?
And at this point in time, it has to be a healthy balance between the two, because, setting up steel plants and doing all of that is not going to happen overnight. And so if we are getting a competitive rate from China or from other parts of the world, I think it's fair enough to import it as long as the vision is to build our infrastructure. And I think if it's coming at a cost that's less than even probably an indigenous production at this point in time, we shouldn't dwell too much on it. And I think we need to focus on actually building it out. The United States is doing the same thing right now. While they're trying to reestablish themselves in terms of self-sufficiency from, starting more steel plants, things of that kind, they're not able to do it overnight. And so I think, some amount of dependence is going to be there. We shouldn't, trouble ourselves too much with that. I think the focus needs to be on building more infrastructure. And, to tell you the truth, while, we are building interstate connectivity across the country, our urban infrastructure is truly suffering. And I think that's something where we need to really focus on. If you look at traffic within cities, if you look at the kind of, wastage of fuel within cities, that needs a much bigger impetus. And I think we need to start fixing those problems, water management across cities. So these are real challenges that we have. And I think to be a fully developed economy and raise the 800 million out of poverty, I think, it requires a larger vision. And I think, kudos to this government for getting the ball rolling, for continuing to keep the ball rolling. And I think over the next 2 decades, we will see India's infrastructure improving. I'm very proud to say that, all multimodally, I think we are improving. Our airports are improving, port connectivity, connectivity to the hinterland. All of that is really getting an impetus. And it's a visionary plan. And I think I compliment the government for that.
Absolutely. I'll also look at it in terms of how the infrastructure burgeoins, and thereby we get a number of industries, businesses that set up their base in several parts of India, not just in the metropolitan cities, but also in the tier 2, tier 3, smaller villages as well, bringing in employment. It also gets to attract FDI. There are foreign investors who at this point in time looking and already have started setting up plants. There have been a change in alternative supply chains which are looking inwards towards India. And this all becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because there you have it. On one hand, you have the infrastructure that is being built. On the other hand, there are various sources of revenue that get generated. You get the jobs, the per capita income of the country increases, and thereby when you talk about the GDP, talking about the 5th largest economy becoming 3rd largest economy, the $10 trillion GDP dream, it all culminates into one big synchronized plan. I'm out of time. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.